Imagine if the world stopped, economies crash, factories sit empty, and millions lose their jobs. What does classical economics tell you? Don't worry. The system will fix itself. Just wait. But how long should we wait? A month? A year? Or should we accept the idea that, in the long run, we are all dead? This is where a genius stepped onto the stage, John Maynard Keynes. He was not just an economist but also a stockbroker and an art lover. Most importantly, he was a rebel who wiped away the classical rules. He taught us to see the government not as a passive observer during a crisis but as an active savior. Are you ready? Today we will take a deep dive into the life and ideas of Keynes, the father of modern macroeconomics and one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. We will explore how he permanently changed the economy. This is not just economic history. It's the story of a war of ideas that saved the world. John Maynard Keynes' story begins in Cambridge, the intellectual heart of England, where he was born in 1883 into an academic family. His father was an economist and his mother was the first female mayor of Cambridge. Thus, Keynes possessed both academic brilliance and practical administrative skill. A mathematical genius, he entered Cambridge on a scholarship and achieved incredible success in mathematics. He could read a financial equation as easily as a literary piece. In fact, his work, a treatise on probability, demonstrated his genius in statistics and uncertainty. This concept of uncertainty would later become the cornerstone of his economic theory. His formal economic education was surprisingly brief. However, his professor, Alfred Marshall, told him, "Come, this is your home," and appointed him as an academic. Keynes quickly became central to Cambridge's academic and social life. He was one of the brightest members of the Bloomsbury Group, and was especially noted for his artistic and literary leanings. He was not just an isolated academic, but rather a sophisticated man closely involved with art, aesthetics, and human nature. Keynes's first foray onto the global stage coincided with the aftermath of World War I. In 1919, he represented the British Treasury at the Versailles Peace Conference, where the victors and losers of the war gathered. What he witnessed there left a deep impression on him. The victorious powers were imposing impossibly heavy reparations on Germany. The politicians focused only on revenge and short-term gain. With his mathematical and economic vision, Keynes clearly saw that this situation would be disastrous for all of Europe. To him, this was not peace, but rather an economic guarantee of a new war that would erupt just 20 years later. His conscience would not allow him to stay. He resigned and immediately wrote the historic book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace. The book exposed the moral and economic absurdity of the reparations. As a political visionary, Keynes cried out to the world that economics was not just about numbers, but also determined the morality and future of a society. This book cemented his reputation as a global thought leader, not just an economist. Then, 1929 arrived. The New York Stock Exchange crashed, dragging world economies into a depression unlike anything seen before. Unemployment in the U.S. hit 25%. People waited outside banks, shocked by the loss of their life savings. So what did dominant classical economics say up to that point? Wait, wages and prices will fall. Falling prices will stimulate demand. As demand increases, production will rise and unemployment will correct itself. The market will balance everything with its invisible hand. But that didn't happen. On the contrary, things got worse. Why? Because when an unemployed person's wages fall, they no longer have money to spend. Falling wages reduced demand further, leading companies to shrink even more. This was the infamous vicious cycle. The economy was stuck in a bad equilibrium, resulting in high unemployment and being far from full employment. Keynes seized this opportunity to challenge the old dogma. After years of work, he published his magnum opus in 1936, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. It was not just an economics book, it was a bomb thrown at economic thought. Keynes rejected the classic premise that the economy always operates at full capacity if left alone. He introduced two core concepts. 1. Effective demand. According to Keynes, the level of production in the economy, that is, how many people will be employed, depends entirely on aggregate demand. If people aren't spending, why should companies produce? Thus, a shortage of total demand was the real cause of the depression. 2. Animal spirits. This is perhaps Keynes's most human concept. He said that investment decisions are influenced by feelings of enthusiasm or pessimism as much as, if not more than, rational calculations. In a crisis, investors are pessimistic and afraid to invest. This pessimism drags the economy down, even without a real cause. While classical economists assumed that humans were rational, Keynes saw them as they are, emotional and unpredictable. The market could not overcome this pessimism on its own. Someone had to overcome it. That someone was the government. Keynes's solution was simple yet shocking to the dogmas of the time. The government must intervene. When the economy is in a slump and the private sector is not investing, the government must fill the void. This can be done by borrowing or through tax revenue. The important thing was to inject money into the market. This is the heart of Keynesian policy, the multiplier effect. First, the government gives a jobless person a job on a road construction project instead of just giving them a dole payment. Step 2. That worker spends their wages at the local grocery store or tailor shop. Step 3. Having increased their income, the grocer and tailor also spend. Step 4. This spending becomes someone else's income. See? For every 1 unit of money the government injects, economic activity exceeds 1 unit by a factor of 3. This is the lifeblood that restores the fluidity of money. Keynes said that one should not fear a budget deficit during a crisis, borrowing. The revitalized economy would easily close that deficit later. Only short-term action could prevent a long-term collapse. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal program in the United States was the first and most concrete example of Keynesian policies. After World War II, Keynes's ideas became the main prescription for the Western world. Industry flourished and the middle class prospered. This golden age of the economy was largely governed by Keynesian policies. However, as with every theory, Keynesianism faced criticism. During the stagflation period of the 1970s, when there was high inflation and unemployment simultaneously, Keynesian policies proved to be inadequate. Some claimed that continuous government intervention fueled inflation. Monetarist and neoliberal currents gained prominence during this period, but did Keynes die? Never. When the global financial crisis erupted in 2008 and the world stopped in 2020 due to the pandemic, what did governments do? They implemented tax cuts, massive bailout packages, and direct payments to the public. In other words, when crises hit, the world turned to Keynes' ideas again. Even today, Keynes' spirit is present in every crisis discussion. He taught us that the market is not a perfect machine, but rather a flawed structure influenced by human emotions. The biggest lesson is that the government should not just be an umpire, but a player when necessary. John Maynard Keynes died in 1946 at the age of 62. He was an icon who shaped the modern world order. He dedicated his final years to establishing international financial institutions, such as the Bretton Woods Agreement. He reshaped not only his own country but also the global system. His legacy lives on in economic growth figures and in the tradition of courageous government intervention that saved millions from losing their livelihoods. His most important lesson was that we should not ignore current suffering for the sake of long-term theories. Do you think Keynes's solutions are still the right ones for today's debt and inflation problems? We look forward to your thoughts in the comments.